What would you do if you found out the person you trusted most, the one who vowed to hold your hand until the very last breath, was already holding someone else's? Would you scream? Would you forgive? Or would you stay silent because the silence felt safer than the storm? I've asked myself that question 1,000 times, lying awake in the middle of the night, listening to the old clock ticking on the wall. Each tick felt like a reminder that my life was running out. And yet, what haunted me more than the cancer growing inside my body was the secret growing inside my marriage. You see, people think the hardest part of dying is the pain, the weakness, the endless hospital visits and the smell of antiseptic that clings to your clothes. But that is not true. The hardest part of dying is realizing that the person you thought would never betray you already has. I never imagined my story would sound like this. Once upon a time, I was simply Margaret Miller, wife, mother, a woman who baked apple pies on Sunday afternoons and sang along to the radio while hanging laundry in the backyard. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. I believed in forever. I believed in the promise of growing old together, 2 rocking chairs on a porch, warm coffee, laughter at twilight. I believed in the vows we made in a small white church with trembling hands and wide eyes. And yet here I am, telling you a story I never thought I'd tell. My voice may sound calm now, but inside there's a storm that never ends. Because when you are staring at the edge of your life, you see everything more clearly. Every memory, every mistake, every smile, and every lie. So I will ask you again, what would you do if you found out the truth when it was already too late to change it? Would you cling to rage until your last breath? Or would you choose something else? Something heavier, but maybe, in a strange way, lighter too. I am not here to shock you with scandal or to ask for your pity. I am here because silence is too heavy for one soul to carry into the grave. I want you to walk with me through these memories, to sit with me as if we are two old friends sharing tea at the kitchen table. I want you to hear my truth, not because it is beautiful, but because it is real. And maybe, just maybe, when you hear the rest, you'll understand why I chose the path I did, why I stayed silent when my heart was breaking, why love and betrayal walked side by side in my final days. The day I heard the word cancer, it felt like the ground disappeared under my feet. I was sitting in Dr. Reynolds's office, the walls painted that pale green that pretends to be calming but only makes you feel smaller. The hum of the fluorescent light was louder than his voice at first. I watched his lips move. I watched his hands fold together on the desk. But my mind was far away, clinging to the hope that I had misheard. Margaret Miller, he said, carefully, like each syllable carried weight. The tests are clear. It's advanced. We will do everything we can, but... That word but sliced the air like a knife. My ears rang. My fingers clutched the edge of the chair. I had always thought bad news came with drama, tears, gasps, the world spinning. But no. It was quiet. The only sound was the second hand on the clock above his head. Tick, tick, tick. And with every tick I understood. My time had a limit now. I walked out of that office into the bright afternoon sun. The world looked the same. Cars passing, a boy riding his bicycle, a woman carrying groceries. But for me, everything had shifted. I wanted to scream at strangers. Don't you see, my life is ending. But of course I kept walking, quiet. At home I sat on the porch swing, the wood creaking beneath me, and waited for my husband to come home. I rehearsed the words in my head. How do you tell the person you love that your days together are numbered? When he finally arrived, smiling, carrying a bag of takeout, I almost couldn't speak. But I did. John, I have cancer. He froze. The smile dropped from his face. He put the bag down slowly as if every movement had suddenly become heavy. He came to me, held my hand, and whispered, "We'll fight this, Margaret. We'll fight it together." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and thought about forever. How quickly forever can shrink into months, maybe weeks. I thought about all the little things I still wanted to do: watch another summer sunset, smell fresh-baked bread, hear our daughter's laughter echo through the house. But beneath all that longing was a fear I couldn't name yet. A fear not just of dying, but of discovering who would truly stand by me in the days ahead. Because illness reveals people, it strips away masks. And though I didn't know it then, my diagnosis was not the only sentence delivered that day. Something else had already begun to grow in the shadows of our marriage, something colder than cancer. Before the sickness, before the shadows crept into my days, there were years so bright they still glow in my memory like lanterns in the dark. I close my eyes and I can see it all. Our small town with its single main street, the diner with red vinyl booths where everyone knew your name, the sound of church bells on Sunday mornings, calling the whole neighborhood to gather. Life was simple then, and sweet. I remember when I first met John Miller. I was 21, working part-time at the library. He walked in one afternoon, tall and confident, looking for a book on American history. I noticed his hands first, broad, steady hands, and then his eyes, the kind that made you feel seen, even if you weren't speaking. We talked that day about Abraham Lincoln of all things, and by the time he left with a stack of books, I knew something inside me had shifted. Our courtship was tender and shy. John would drive up in his old Chevrolet, the paint fading but the engine steady, and we'd go for drives through the countryside, windows rolled down, the radio playing Elvis Presley or Patsy Cline. The air smelled of hay fields and fresh-cut grass, and we laughed the way only young people laugh, without fear of endings. When John asked me to marry him, it was on the front porch of my parents' house. He was so nervous his hands trembled. He pulled out a simple gold ring, and the porch light flickered, just as I said yes. I can still feel the cool summer air on my skin, the sound of cicadas humming in the trees, the way his arms wrapped around me as if I were the only thing he ever wanted. Our wedding was small, just family and friends in the white church at the end of Maple Street. I wore my mother's lace veil, borrowed and slightly yellowed with age, but I felt like the most beautiful woman alive. John's smile when I walked down the aisle, I thought it would last forever. Afterward, we danced in the church hall, my dress swirling as the record player spun Unchained Melody. I believed every word of the song, believed we would hold on for a lifetime. Those first years together were filled with hope. We bought a little house with a porch swing, planted a garden out back and dreamed of the future. Sunday afternoons meant apple pie cooling on the windowsill, neighbours dropping by to share stories, and John resting in his chair reading the newspaper. Sometimes when I think of those days, it feels like another life. A sweeter one. A life before illness, before betrayal. A life where forever still seemed possible, and love was something unbreakable. It started so quietly, so subtly, that I almost convinced myself I was imagining it. John Miller had always been steady, predictable in the comforting way that husbands often are. He left the house at 8 every morning, came home by 6, kissed my cheek, and asked what was for dinner. For years, that rhythm never faltered. But after the diagnosis, I noticed the first cracks. At first, it was the phone calls. John would step outside to answer, lowering his voice just enough that I couldn't catch the words. He would return a few minutes later with that same calm expression, but his eyes never quite met mine. When I asked who it was, he would smile and say, "Work," or "Just a friend," brushing it off as if I was silly for even asking. Then came the late nights. "Extra meetings," he said, "paperwork piling up." He worked at the insurance office on Main Street, a job that rarely demanded more than daylight hours. Still, I tried to believe him. I told myself that maybe he was just trying to keep busy, to escape the heaviness of our new reality. But in the quiet of the house, when I was alone with my thoughts, doubt began to whisper. Little things added up. A faint scent of perfume on his jacket, not mine. A receipt in his pocket from a restaurant we never went to. The way he sometimes hummed on his way through the door, distracted, almost light-hearted, as if he had been living another life before stepping back into ours. I told myself not to be suspicious. After all, wasn't I the one who was sick? Wasn't it cruel to think the worst of the man who promised to stand by me? But illness sharpens the senses. When your body is failing, your heart notices details you once ignored. One evening I asked directly, "John, are you seeing someone else?" The words felt jagged, scraping my throat on the way out. He froze for half a second, just a half, but long enough for me to see the shadow cross his face. Then he laughed, too quickly, and shook his head. "Margaret, don't be ridiculous, you've just been under stress." I nodded, pretending to believe. But inside something shifted. The seed of suspicion had been planted, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't dig it out. That night, lying beside him in bed, I listened to his steady breathing and wondered how well I really knew the man I had promised forever to. It wasn't proof yet. It was just a feeling. But sometimes, feelings tell the truth long before the facts appear. Evenings became the longest part of my days. The light would fade slowly across the sky, painting the neighborhood in soft gold, and I would settle into the old rocking chair on our porch. The wood creaked beneath me, each sway a slow rhythm against the silence. I would wrap a blanket around my shoulders even in summer, not because of the cold, but because of the emptiness that seemed to seep into my bones. I used to wait for the sound of John Miller's car turning into the driveway, the crunch of tires over gravel, the slam of the door, his steady footsteps climbing the porch stairs. For years, that routine had been the heartbeat of my evenings. Now, more often than not, the driveway stayed empty long after the street lamps flickered on. I told myself he was busy, that life at the office had grown heavier since my diagnosis, that maybe he just needed space to breathe. But each hour stretched wider, and the silence grew louder. Sometimes I passed the time with books, though the words blurred on the page before long. Sometimes I just rocked gently, watching neighbours walk their dogs, listening to the chatter of children riding their bikes. Life went on around me, as if nothing had changed, yet inside my house, inside my marriage, everything had. When John finally returned on those late nights, his excuses were rehearsed: traffic, paperwork, meetings. He would place a kiss on my forehead, too quick, like a habit rather than a desire. I wanted to ask more, to demand the truth, but my voice would falter. What if I was wrong? What if my sickness was twisting my mind, making me see shadows where none existed? And worse, what if I was right? So I waited. Every evening I waited. I listened for his steps on the porch, the familiar sound that once brought comfort, but now carried dread. The waiting became its own kind of sickness, heavier even than the cancer in my body. A sickness of the soul born from doubt and loneliness. One night, I rocked there until the stars covered the sky. The cicadas sang in the trees, and I whispered aloud to the darkness, "Is this what forever feels like?" The words vanished into the night air, unanswered. In that chair I learned the cruelest truth. Loneliness is not the absence of people. It is the absence of the one person you need most, the one you love, sitting beside you. And though I still wore the name Margaret Miller, wife, partner, beloved, I felt more like a ghost rocking in the shadows of a life that no longer belonged to me. It was the little things that gave him away, those quiet details that most people would overlook, but that my heart caught like splinters. The phone, for example. John Miller had never been secretive with it. For years it sat on the kitchen counter, ringing with calls from friends or work. Nothing worth hiding. But slowly that changed. He began keeping it in his pocket, close to him at all times. When it rang, he would step into the other room, lowering his voice until it was only a faint murmur. At first, I told myself it was business. The insurance office sometimes called after hours, clients with urgent questions, problems that couldn't wait. But then I noticed the way his tone softened, the pauses in his words, as though he were listening more than speaking. When he came back, I would ask who it was, and he would smile too quickly. "Just work, Margaret," before changing the subject. His answers never matched the look in his eyes. Then came the perfume. A scent that didn't belong to me. I hadn't worn perfume in months. Chemotherapy had made me sensitive to smells. Yet one evening when John hung his jacket on the back of the chair, a fragrance clung to the fabric, floral, sweet, unmistakably feminine. I pressed my face to it, breathing in, as though proof lived in the scent itself. The realization burned my throat. The next day it happened again. Another jacket, another trace of something not mine. I wanted to believe it was nothing, that perhaps someone at work had brushed against him, or the scent lingered from a crowded room. But the truth settled in my chest like a stone. Once you recognize betrayal, it cannot be unseen. I tested him once. I leaned close when he came through the door, kissed his cheek and whispered, "You smell different tonight." For a moment he froze. Then he laughed, forced and brittle, and said, "Must have been the secretary at the office. She wears too much perfume." I nodded, pretending to accept it. But inside something fractured. In the quiet of my bedroom later that night, I lay awake listening to him breathe beside me. I stared into the dark, my hand resting on the space between us, a gulf that felt wider with each passing day. The phone on his nightstand buzzed once. He silenced it quickly, thinking I was asleep. My eyes remained open, staring at the ceiling. Cancer was already stealing my strength, but these calls, that perfume, was stealing something deeper. It was stealing the faith I had carried for a lifetime, and without faith, even love begins to die. I could only hold it inside for so long. Suspicion is like water dripping on stone, slow, steady, and relentless until the surface finally cracks. One evening, after another late night and another quick excuse, I decided I couldn't stay silent anymore. The words burned my tongue as I sat at the kitchen table waiting for John Miller to walk through the door. He arrived past 9, loosening his tie, setting his briefcase down with practiced ease. "Sorry, Margaret," he said, not even meeting my eyes. "Busy night." I studied him, the way his collar was slightly rumpled, the faint trace of perfume clinging to his shirt, the distracted smile he wore like a mask. My hands trembled, but I steadied them on the table. "John," I said softly, "are you seeing someone else?" The air froze. For a moment he didn't move. Then he laughed, a quick, sharp sound that didn't reach his eyes. "Margaret, don't be ridiculous. Where would you even get such an idea?" "I get it," I whispered, "from the phone calls you take in the other room, from the smell of perfume that isn't mine, from the nights you don't come home until I've already given up waiting." My voice cracked, but I forced myself to keep going. "Please, just tell me the truth." His jaw tightened. He walked to the refrigerator, poured himself a glass of water, and turned his back to me. "You're under a lot of stress," he said finally. "The treatments, the exhaustion, they're playing tricks on you. You need rest, not wild ideas." The dismissal cut deeper than any confession could have. He didn't yell, didn't argue. He brushed me aside as if my fears were nothing more than the ramblings of a sick woman. My heart pounded. I wanted to scream, to throw the glass from his hand, to make him look me in the eye and admit it. But instead I sat in silence, my body trembling with weakness I couldn't hide. "John," I said again, softer this time, "please don't lie to me." He sighed, finally turning to face me. His smile was gentle, almost pitying. "Margaret, I love you, Don't let your illness fill your head with doubts. I'm here, aren't I? And that was it. Conversation closed. He left the kitchen, the sound of his footsteps heavy on the stairs. I sat there long after he'd gone, staring at the empty chair across from me. The silence in the room was louder than his denial. Deep down, I knew. And worse than knowing was realizing he would never give me the truth I begged for. The sickness crept deeper into me with every passing week. My body grew weaker. Stairs became mountains. Grocery bags felt like boulders. Even the simple act of brushing my hair left me breathless. The mirror showed a stranger, pale skin, hollow cheeks, eyes that carried shadows. But while my body failed me, my senses sharpened in ways I hadn't expected. It was as though illness stripped away all the noise, leaving me with an almost painful clarity. I began to notice everything, every pause in John Miller's voice, every hesitation when he answered my questions, every glance at the clock when he thought I wasn't watching. It was like living with a man who existed in two worlds, and I was trapped in the one he had already left behind. I could hear the phone buzzing in his pocket when he excused himself to the porch. I could hear the way his tone shifted when he said, "Hello," softer, warmer, more alive than the words he gave me. He would lower his voice, but in the stillness of the house, even whispers felt loud. My sense of smell betrayed me too. The faint traces of perfume lingered longer now, clinging to his shirts, his hair, sometimes even his skin. A fragrance sweet and powdery, unfamiliar, unwelcome. I tried once to wash it out of his jacket before he noticed, scrubbing at the fabric until my arms gave out, but the scent clung stubbornly, as though it wanted to be found. Even the air between us felt different. When John sat beside me, I could feel the distance, like a wall, invisible but solid. His hand would rest on mine, but his mind was elsewhere. His body was in the room, but his heart was wandering. And yet, to everyone else, he was the perfect husband. He drove me to treatments, carried my bags, smiled politely to neighbours who asked how I was doing. They saw devotion. I felt absence. Illness has a way of stripping away illusions, and mine revealed a truth I didn't want to see. John was already slipping away, not because of death, but because of choice. At night, when he fell asleep beside me, I would lie awake, my ears tuned to the smallest sounds, the buzz of his phone, the sigh he gave when he thought of something far away, the restless turning of his body. My world had grown smaller, confined to a failing body and a lonely bed, but my awareness grew sharper, piercing. And with every detail I noticed, the truth grew louder, until I could no longer pretend not to hear it. It happened on a quiet afternoon, the kind where the air feels heavy and the minutes drag like hours. I was lying on the couch, too tired to move, the blanket pulled up to my chin. John Miller had stepped outside to take another call, something he had been doing more and more often. Usually he made sure the door was shut tight, but that day he left it slightly ajar. At first I wasn't paying attention. My eyes were closed, my body sinking into that half-sleep where the mind drifts but doesn't fully rest. Then I heard his voice. It was softer than the one he used with me, warm and tender in a way that startled me. "Yes. I miss you too," he said, his tone almost boyish. There was a pause, then the words that changed everything. "I'll be there soon, sweetheart." My eyes flew open. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might burst through my ribs. Sweetheart. The word echoed in my ears like a bell tolling at a funeral. I had been called sweetheart once long ago in the days when our love was new. But now that name belonged to someone else. I held my breath, afraid to make the slightest sound. I heard him chuckle quietly, heard the softness of a man in love, or in something that pretended to be love. Then the crunch of his footsteps as he paced the porch, lowering his voice again until his words dissolved into murmurs I couldn't catch. I lay frozen, staring at the ceiling, my body trembling under the blanket. I wanted to rise, to fling the door open, to shout, "I heard you!" But I couldn't. My strength was gone, not just from the illness, but from the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. When he came back inside, he wore the same calm smile, as though nothing had been said. He kissed my forehead lightly, set his phone on the counter, and asked if I needed tea. His voice was steady, his hands sure, but all I could hear was that word ringing in my head. Sweetheart. I nodded, unable to speak, my throat tight with unspilled tears. He went about the evening as if nothing had changed, but for me, everything had. That single word was more than proof. It was a sentence, the quiet verdict that what I feared was true. And as I sat there, silent, I realized something even more devastating. He would never admit it. Not to me, not to anyone. The truth was mine alone to carry. After that call, after the word sweetheart pierced through the walls of my home, silence became my shield. I didn't confront John Miller. I didn't scream. I didn't demand the truth, because what truth was left to demand? I already knew. Proof wasn't needed anymore. It lived in my chest like a stone pressing down on my lungs. That night I sat across from him at the dinner table. He ate his meal with practiced calm, cutting his meat into small pieces, asking me about the neighbour's garden, about whether I wanted to watch a movie later. His voice was steady, polite, almost tender. I nodded at the right times, gave small answers, but inside I was somewhere else. Every word he spoke felt like a veil drawn over the truth. I studied him the way you study a stranger. The lines on his face I had once traced with love now looked unfamiliar. The hands that once held me in moments of passion now seemed foreign. I watched the way he smiled at me, that easy smile he wore like a mask, and I wondered if the other woman saw it too. Did she believe it? Did she think it belonged to her alone? When the dishes were cleared, he kissed the top of my head and said, "You should rest, Margaret." His touch lingered for a second, and I felt a rush of confusion, because even in betrayal, my heart still longed for him. That was the cruelest part. Love does not vanish with the discovery of lies. It clings stubbornly, even when it's wounded. In bed, I lay beside him listening to the rhythm of his breathing. He fell asleep easily, his body warm against mine as though nothing had shifted. My eyes stayed open in the dark. I wanted to turn to him to whisper, "I know." But the words stuck in my throat. What good would it do? Would it change his heart? Would it stop the perfume, the calls, the promises whispered to someone else? So I stayed quiet. I tucked the truth deep inside me, a secret that burned every time I swallowed it down. Silence was safer than a fight I no longer had the strength to endure. The cancer was already devouring my body. I could not let rage devour what little remained of my soul. But in that silence, something inside me shifted forever. I was no longer his wife in the way I once had been. I was a witness to my own betrayal, a ghost in my own marriage, and though he never confessed, I no longer needed him to. Because sometimes, knowing is louder than words. The anger came in waves, sudden, sharp, and overwhelming like a storm breaking against the shore. Some mornings I would wake with it already burning in my chest, my fists clenched around the bedsheets. I would look at John Miller moving about the room, buttoning his shirt, tying his tie, humming under his breath, and I would think, how dare you betray me while I am fighting for every breath? I wanted to shout it, to force the truth into the light. The words lined themselves up in my throat like soldiers ready for battle. "I know about her, I heard you. I can smell her perfume when you walk into this house." I rehearsed those sentences in my head 100 times, imagined the way his face would freeze, the way the mask would finally crack. But every time I opened my mouth, nothing came. The anger was fierce, but my body was weak. Rage requires energy, and I had so little left to give. Some days it felt as if I had to choose between saving my strength for breathing or spending it on fury that would only echo back into silence. So instead of speaking, I watched him, I studied every move, every word, every glance at his phone. I caught the way his lips curved into a smile when he thought of her. I heard the sigh he gave when he thought I was asleep, a sigh that didn't belong to me anymore. And inside, the fire burned hotter. At night, when he lay beside me, I sometimes whispered into the dark, not to him, but to myself. You don't deserve my silence, John Miller. You don't deserve my loyalty. The words slipped into the shadows, unheard, unsatisfied. Still, they gave me a small relief, like opening a window in a suffocating room. There were moments when the anger turned into fantasies. I pictured calling her number, telling her exactly what it meant to love a man who was already bound by vows he had broken. I imagined looking John straight in the eye and saying, "You killed me long before the cancer ever could." But when morning came, the fantasies faded. I would see him in the kitchen, pouring me a cup of tea, setting it gently by my side, asking if I needed anything. And the anger twisted into something else, a cruel mixture of love and hate, longing and betrayal. The desire to tell the truth never left me. It lived inside, heavy and restless, pressing against my ribs. One day I thought, one day I will say it all. But not yet. Not today. For now the storm remained locked behind my lips, roaring in silence. There was a day not long after that storm of anger inside me, when the house was unusually quiet. No phone calls, no hurried footsteps, no excuses about late meetings. Just silence, the kind that stretched wide, almost peaceful. I sat by the window in the living room, a blanket wrapped around me, and for a moment the stillness carried me backward in time. I remembered the first year of our marriage, when John Miller and I moved into this very house. The paint was peeling, the roof leaked when it rained, and the garden was nothing more than patches of stubborn weeds. But to us, it was a palace. We painted the kitchen walls yellow because I said it reminded me of sunshine. John laughed at the colour, but he held the roller steady, letting me have my way. In the evenings, we ate dinner on the porch steps, drinking sweet tea from mismatched glasses, watching fireflies blink in the dark. Those were days of laughter, small arguments about nothing, kisses that ended in giggles, dreams whispered late at night. We didn't have much money, but we had youth and hope, and that was more than enough. John used to call me his forever girl, and I believed him with every part of my being. As I sat there on that quiet day, those memories felt like sunlight warming my skin. But in the same breath, the shadows returned. The present pressed against me with its cold truth. The same man who once danced with me barefoot in the kitchen now stepped outside to call another woman. The same voice that once whispered forever to me now whispered sweetheart to her. It was unbearable, that contrast. Love and betrayal side by side, as if my life had become a painting split down the middle, half glowing with colour, half drowned in grey. I felt both halves inside me at once. One part longed for those golden years, desperate to relive them, even for a moment. The other part seethed with grief, mourning not just the betrayal, but the death of the dream we once shared. I closed my eyes and let the memories wash over me. Our wedding day, the way John's hand trembled when he slipped the ring on my finger, the sound of his laughter echoing through the hallway of this house. And then I opened them again to see the empty chair across the room, the phone sitting silently on the counter, waiting to betray me again. That day taught me the cruelest lesson. Sometimes the past is brighter than the future will ever be again. And living with both, the light and the darkness, was its own kind of torment. It was my idea to go for a walk. I hadn't been outside much, my body was tired, my steps unsteady, but something inside me longed for air, for the simple act of moving under the open sky. I asked John Miller if he would take me into town just for a little while, just so I could feel like myself again. He hesitated, but then agreed, helping me into the car as though he were the picture of devotion. We drove through familiar streets, past the bakery that still smelled of fresh bread, past the little bookstore where we used to browse on Saturday mornings. I watched the town roll by like a movie from another lifetime. When we reached the grocery store parking lot, John said he needed to run in quickly. "Stay here, Margaret," he told me gently. "I'll just be a minute." So I waited. The window was cracked open, and I breathed in the summer air, warm and thick with the scent of cut grass. I let my eyes wander, half drifting into memory, until I saw him. John wasn't walking toward the store. He was walking toward her. A woman stood by a silver car, her hair loose around her shoulders, a smile blooming across her face when she saw him. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. John's step quickened. He reached her, and without hesitation he leaned in close. I watched as he touched her arm, as she tilted her face toward him. They laughed together, the kind of laughter that comes easy, that belongs to new love or stolen love. Or it was like watching a play unfold, except it wasn't a play. It was my life, my marriage, my husband. For a moment, rage flared so hot, I thought I might fling the car door open, scream his name across the parking lot, make the whole world see what he had hidden from me. But my hands were weak, my body fragile. And more than that, my heart felt hollow. What was the point of exposing him? What was left to win? I sank back against the seat, my pulse racing, tears stinging my eyes. They didn't see me. To them, I was invisible, a ghost sitting only yards away. I watched them for as long as I could bear it, then closed my eyes. When John returned, carrying a small bag from the store, his face was calm, his voice steady. "Sorry it took so long," he said. He didn't know I had seen. He didn't know that silence had become my answer. And in that silence, something inside me broke for the last time. When John Miller slid back into the driver's seat, his hands steady on the wheel, I felt as though the world around us had shifted. He placed the small grocery bag between us, offered me a quick smile, and asked if I was comfortable. I nodded, my lips dry, my voice caught somewhere deep inside my chest. I wanted to say something. I wanted to tell him that I had seen, that I knew. But the words lodged in my throat like stones. The car moved through the streets of our town, past houses with trimmed lawns, past children riding bicycles, past couples walking hand in hand. I watched it all through the window as though I were already fading from this world, an observer rather than a participant. Every sound, every sight seemed distant, muffled. Inside me, the silence grew. John talked about ordinary things, how the weather had been warm for June, how the garden needed tending, how Mrs. Thompson down the street had asked after me. His voice was calm, casual, practiced. I heard it, but I also heard the echo of his other voice, the one he had used just minutes earlier in that parking lot, soft and intimate, not meant for me. When we reached home, he helped me out of the car, his hand firm under my arm. To anyone watching, it would have looked like devotion. To me, it felt like a performance. I leaned on him because my body demanded it, but my soul recoiled. Inside, he unpacked the groceries, humming as if the world had offered him no secrets. I moved quietly to the porch and sat in my rocking chair, staring out at the fading light. My heart thudded dully in my chest, my hands folded tight in my lap. I could have called him out. I could have forced the truth into the open. Instead, I let the silence stretch. The truth was, I no longer had the strength for confrontation. My illness had claimed too much already, my energy, my appetite, my reflection in the mirror. To add rage to that burden would have crushed what little remained of me. So I chose stillness. I chose to walk back into the house that night and eat the dinner he served. I chose to listen to his stories, to his carefully arranged laughter, without answering. But silence is not forgiveness. Silence is not forgetting. Silence is simply survival. And as I lay in bed beside him pretending to sleep, I knew that a part of me had already walked away. My body was still here, but my heart had slipped quietly out the door of that parking lot, and it was never coming back. Night is when the house is quiet enough for the truth to speak. I lie in the dark, John Miller's breathing steady beside me, and I let the words flow only inside my head. Betrayal. The word tastes bitter, heavier than any medicine I swallow. I turn it over and over, wondering how a man who once swore to cherish me could now carry another woman's perfume on his skin. Betrayal is not just the act itself, it is the shattering of memory. When I remember our wedding day, I can no longer hold it as pure. His promises echo differently now, hollow where they once rang solid. When I recall the long drives with the radio playing, the laughter that filled our small house, the image shifts. The past is stained by what I now know of the present. That is the cruelest cut. Betrayal doesn't only steal today, it reaches backward, poisoning yesterday. And yet, forgiveness whispers at me in the dark. Not because he deserves it. No, forgiveness has nothing to do with the guilty. It has everything to do with the one who carries the weight. Anger is heavy, heavier even than this cancer growing inside me. To drag it with me toward the end would mean I die twice. Once in body, once in spirit. I ask myself, can I let it go? Can I forgive a man who holds another while I lie here fading? Can I close my eyes one day and leave this world without screaming the truth into his face? Some nights I think I cannot. The fire inside me is too sharp, the wound too raw. But then I hear my daughter's laughter in memory, see her bright face as a child running barefoot across the lawn, and I remember, life is too short, too fragile, to end in bitterness. Perhaps forgiveness is not about saying it was okay. It was never okay. Perhaps forgiveness is about choosing peace in my last days, about loosening my grip on rage so that my final breath isn't poisoned. I whisper into the darkness, I know John Miller. I know. He doesn't stir, doesn't hear. But the words are not for him. They are for me, for my own release. Betrayal may have broken me, but maybe, just maybe, forgiveness can carry me across the final threshold lighter than I ever imagined. And in the stillness of night, with only the ticking clock as witness, I pray that choosing peace will mean I die as Margaret Miller. Not as a woman destroyed, but as a woman free. John Miller became attentive in ways that anyone else might have called devotion. He brought me tea without asking, set pillows behind my back when I coughed, checked the thermostat to make sure the house was warm enough. He held doors open, carried bags, reminded me to take my medicine. To the neighbours, to our daughter when she visited, he must have looked like the perfect husband, standing steady beside his ailing wife. But to me, every gesture rang hollow. I watched him move through the house as if he belonged to it, yet there was a distance between us no touch could close. When he tucked the blanket around my shoulders, I no longer felt comfort. I felt a stranger's hands. When he asked, "Do you need anything, Margaret?" I heard only the echo of his words to someone else. "Sweetheart." I began to study him the way one studies a portrait, admiring the familiar lines, yet knowing the eyes did not follow me anymore. His face was the same face that had smiled at me on our wedding day, but now it seemed like a mask stretched over secrets. The man who poured my tea in the kitchen each morning was not the same man who slipped outside to whisper into the phone at night. And once you see the fracture, you can never unsee it. He would sit beside me on the couch, his arm draped across the back as though we were still us. He asked if I wanted to watch the evening news, if I felt strong enough for a drive. I nodded, answered softly, but inside I was screaming, "Who are you? Where did you go? And how can you play this role so convincingly while the truth still clings to your jacket in perfume and whispers?" I caught myself staring at him sometimes, imagining him as a stranger passing me on the street, polite and kind, but unknown. That was how it felt now, like we shared a roof, but not a life, like he was performing the part of husband for the world to see while giving his real self away somewhere else. And yet, I did not push him away. I accepted his care, let him place the tea in my hands, let him adjust my blanket, let him call me Margaret with practiced tenderness. Because my body needed what my heart no longer trusted. But I knew deep inside that I was no longer his wife in the way I once was. I was his patient, his duty, and nothing more. As the days folded into one another, I began to feel the closeness of the end. Not in a dramatic way, not like the movies, but in the quiet certainty of my own body. Every step cost more breath. Every morning I woke with less strength than the one before. Death was no longer an idea waiting far away. It was a presence sitting calmly in the corner of the room, patient, unhurried, watching me with steady eyes. I thought often about what would remain after I was gone. Not the dishes stacked in the cupboards, not the quilts folded in the linen closet. No, what lingers after a life is the memory of who you were to others, the words you spoke, the love you gave, the wounds you left. And I asked myself, what will John Miller remember of me? Will he remember the girl who danced barefoot in the kitchen, or the woman who stared at him in silence, broken by his betrayal? I did not want bitterness to be my legacy. I could not bear the thought of my daughter remembering me as angry, consumed by rage in my final days. I wanted her to carry laughter, warmth, stories of apple pies cooling on the windowsill, of summer evenings on the porch swing, of love that once was real, even if it faded in the end. So I began to practice letting go. At night, while John slept, I whispered prayers not for healing but for peace. Let me leave lightly, I said into the darkness. Let me set down the weight. I thought of forgiveness not as a gift for him, but as a gift for myself. To forgive did not mean to excuse or forget. It meant to release the chain wrapped around my heart so I could step into death unbound. Still, the anger rose at times. The images of him with her haunted me, sharp and cruel. But I told myself, I cannot take this anger with me. It will not cross the threshold with my soul. I must leave it here, in this house, in this life. And so I prepared, not only for death, but for forgiveness. I wrote notes to my daughter, reminding her of all the ways she made me proud. I folded letters into the pages of old photo albums. I traced memories like beads through my fingers, trying to polish them until they shone brighter than the shadows. If death was waiting, then I wanted to walk toward it lighter. And forgiveness, whether or not John ever deserved it, was the only way I could. It was late afternoon when I asked John Miller to sit with me. The sun was slanting through the curtains, painting the room in soft gold, and the air smelled faintly of the tea he had just brewed. He pulled up a chair beside the bed, his face carrying that mixture of worry and gentleness he wore so often these days. For a long while we sat in silence, just listening to the ticking of the clock. "John," I said finally, my voice thin but steady, "there's something I need to ask of you." His brow furrowed, and he leaned closer, waiting for words he must have feared. But I didn't speak of perfume, of phone calls, of the woman who had stolen his heart. I spoke of something else. "When I'm gone," I began, "don't let the good parts of me die with me. Remember the girl you met in the library, the one who argued with you about history books. Remember the nights we danced in the kitchen when we had no money but all the love in the world. Remember our daughter's first laugh, the way her tiny fingers curled around yours." His eyes softened, and he reached for my hand. I let him hold it, though in my heart I knew the distance between us had already grown beyond reach. Still, I wanted this one thing. "I don't care about flowers at my grave," I continued, "and I don't need prayers whispered over stones. What I need is memory. Let me live in your stories, in the way you speak my name when someone asks about me. Don't let me become just the sick woman who faded away. His lips trembled and he whispered, "Margaret, don't talk like that. We still have time." I shook my head gently. "No, John. Time is already slipping. We both know it. What matters now isn't how many days are left, but what you carry after they're gone. Promise me you won't let the memory of us vanish, not even if life takes you in directions I cannot follow." He squeezed my hand tightly, his eyes glistening. "I promise," he said. I nodded, closing my eyes for a moment. I didn't tell him I knew about her. I didn't need to. This conversation wasn't about betrayal, it was about legacy, about making sure that whatever else had crumbled between us, something true would remain. Because in the end, I didn't want to be remembered for how I died. I wanted to be remembered for how I lived, for the love that was once real, and for the memories that deserved to outlast the silence. I began writing the letter on a quiet morning when the house was still. The pen felt heavy in my trembling hand, but the words flowed as if they had been waiting for years. I did not address it with anger. I had no energy left for rage. Instead, I wrote with the calm of a woman who has nothing more to lose and nothing left to hide. "John Miller," I began, "if you are reading this, it means I am gone. It means my voice has faded from these rooms and my chair sits empty on the porch. But I need you to hear me one last time, because silence cannot be the ending of our story." I paused, staring at the paper, then let the truth spill. I knew. I knew about the phone calls, the perfume, the laughter that wasn't meant for me. "I heard you call her sweetheart. I saw you in the parking lot. Don't tell yourself you hid it well. You didn't." I carried that knowledge inside me every day like a second illness. My hand shook, but I pressed on. I could have screamed. I could have thrown your lies in your face, but I didn't. Do you know why? Because I chose something else. I chose love. Not because you deserved it, but because I refused to let betrayal be the last word of my life. Cancer was already stealing my body. I would not let bitterness steal my soul. Tears blurred the ink as I wrote, but I let them fall. You broke my heart, John. You broke it when I needed you most. And yet, I forgive you. Not for your sake, but for mine. So I can leave this world lighter. So I can step beyond without carrying the weight of hatred. I folded the letter carefully, sealing it in an envelope with my name on the front. I placed it inside the drawer of my nightstand, where I knew he would find it after I was gone. I imagined his face when he opened it, the shock, the shame, the memory of my voice woven into every line. I knew, I ended, but I chose love. Learn from that, John. Let my death teach you what my life could not, that loyalty is not a burden. It is a gift. Give it freely to no one but the one who truly holds your heart. If not for me, then for yourself. And with that final sentence, the weight I had carried for so long loosened just enough for me to breathe again. The end came quietly, almost gently, as though death had been waiting in the corner all along and simply decided it was time to take my hand. I lay in the bed near the window, the curtains open so the last light of the day could spill across the room. The air smelled faintly of lilacs from the bush outside, and for a moment I let myself believe it was spring again, that life was beginning, not ending. John Miller sat beside me, his face drawn, his eyes red from nights without sleep. He spoke softly, words I barely heard, words that drifted around me like a lullaby. Perhaps he thought I was too far gone to understand, but I understood everything. His voice carried regret, sorrow, perhaps even love, the complicated kind that arrives too late. I looked at him one last time. Not the way I looked at him in anger, not with suspicion, but with the quiet acceptance of a woman who has already laid her burdens down. I thought of the letter in the nightstand, waiting for his hands to unfold it, waiting to tell him the truth he never admitted. I knew it would outlive me. My silence would not. My daughter stood at the foot of the bed, her hands clasped, her eyes wide with grief. I wanted to tell her not to remember me like this, frail and fading. I wanted her to carry the memory of laughter, of apple pies cooling on the windowsill, of music in the kitchen. I wanted her to know that love, real love, had been a part of my life, even if betrayal had stolen its ending. As my breath grew shallow, I whispered, not to John, not even to her, but to whoever might listen beyond this life. Betrayal kills faster than illness, but forgiveness makes death easier. The words left my lips like a prayer, like a gift for anyone who needed them. The room grew softer, the colours fading. I felt no fear, only release. The weight I had carried for so long slipped from my chest, leaving only lightness behind. My last thought was not of perfume, not of phone calls in the night, not of lies. My last thought was of forgiveness, thin, fragile, imperfect, but mine. And then, like a candle gently snuffed out, I was gone. Yet my story, my truth, remained, waiting to be carried, waiting to be remembered, not as the story of a woman destroyed, but of a woman who chose peace when she could have chosen rage. What part of this story touched you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to read them. If this story felt close to your heart, give it a like, subscribe if you want to be part of a space where real stories matter. Got a couple more minutes? Check out the next story. It's also about the things we rarely say out loud.